Welcome back to Studio 5. If you've ever had a conversation with someone who doesn't show a lick of emotion, you know just how awkward that conversation can be. You're waiting for maybe a smile acknowledging that you've mentioned something funny, or a nod that lets you know they understand what you're saying, they're listening to you. But when your words are met with a blank stare, it's hard to tell if you are being heard. Studio 5 relationship coach Dr. Matt Townsend has a few strategies to help us communicate better with a friend or a spouse or a neighbor who is just hard to read. How are you?
Excellent.
You know,
I am doing great.
You know I'm kind of worked up about this topic, right?
I don't know why.
I've just had a couple of experiences in the last few months where I have been met with seriously expressionless people, and I can't crack them. And you know, after doing this show for 10 years,
one thing, crack anything.
Well, one thing you learn is how to socialize with a lot of different peoples and social rhythms. These people throw me off big time.
They're different, right? We don't know why, and usually I've got like the magic. So you just throw the fairy dust, and then they change.
You give them a wink, you give them a smile, something.
But they don't crack, do they?
No.
Why?
I don't know, and you know what especially throws me off is when it's women.
Yeah.
Because
you would think they just jump in and...
Yeah, woman to woman, you expect that warm, welcoming, validating, nurturing.
Right. But notice, you're recognizing it. You recognize that there's a difference going on here. You recognize it. So what does that say about you?
That I'm observant?
Yeah. See,
I don't know that I'm
in a way,
OCD
it just says that you're adept, you're advanced here, because you're recognizing that they're not giving you this feedback you need, a nod, a nudge, a smile, They don't do that, and you're recognizing it. Now, here's the key, and one of the first things I always want us to do in any communication is actually recognize it's happening.
Okay.
What we usually do is react to it, and we don't bring it into our higher brain and say, oh, this person has no affect, this person's not emoting.
Right.
We don't see that. But if you can start to recognize it and get it into your brain and start thinking about it, like, what's going on here? What's interesting about what happens there is you can start to identify why. You're already in the beginning of trying to understand it and fix it. See, we are so used to people smiling and laughing with us to know that they're in, that the minute someone's not, we assume they're not in. They're not with me. They must not like me. And that's nature, and that's normal. You should be a little afraid of the person that's not showing any affect, because they might be ready to attack you.
There is something there.
Yeah.
Well, and I think the natural tendency, that's helpful just right there, because the natural tendency is to kind of turn inward and mimic their style, then you become just as awkward. So you're saying notice the difference, it elevates you to that higher place of thinking.
We're supposed to do this naturally, and you're supposed to be able to feed off of it. That's why we can see facial expressions like in buildings. You'll see a face, or on the front of a car, the hood of a car, you'll see a face. We're paying attention to that for a reason. So when we don't get the response we want, it makes us a little worried. So another rule is don't take it personally.
See, I was going to ask, how can I keep that awkwardness from making me insecure?
Well, think about who would really want to do that. Who would want to go through life without affect or without emotion?
No, I'm just kidding.
My friends, my mother. So one of the things, like I speak a lot, and when I do public speaking, I will have somebody in the audience that will not laugh once.
You notice.
They won't blink. They won't. They just sit there. And so many times in my head, I'm like, they hate me. That person's going to shank me. Watch out for that person. I think they're sharpening a knife right now. So here's what I've learned, though. Many times, those same people that show nothing still walk up after and they say, I loved that. That was amazing. That was wonderful. That felt so great. And in my head, I'm like, well, could you smile?
Could you let me see that?
But here's what I've learned. There's a million reasons why some people don't do it, right? Some of them are physiological.
Okay.
It could be something like they've had a stroke. It could be something like Parkinson's.
Sure.
Some of it could be psychological. They've been through trauma, dramatic issues in their life. There's psychological disorders that start to affect the affect. It could be chemistry. It could be some of the medicines they're on. It could be simply too much Botox. It could be, an accident that has harmed the nerves in their face.
So we can't jump to conclusions.
So if you take it personal, though, then you actually turn in on yourself. Instead of what you need with somebody that has that issue is you need to turn out and turn on all of your sensors to start gathering more data.
Like what? Like what sort of sensors?
Well, for example, when we take a phone call, we don't have visual affect anyway.
That's true.
And we seem to muster through it, right? So what you might want to start doing is not cueing in on what you're seeing, but start cueing in on what you're hearing. Start cueing in on, like I like play a joke, or I'll say something funny to see if they breathe different, if they giggle a little bit, if they do anything different. It almost doesn't matter. But my goal is to actually see what I am getting from them and let them influence me any way that they can. I also try to then humanize them. So instead of taking it personal, I try to get into them and think, man, what is it like to be trapped in no smile? What is it like to be a person that must go through life and they don't even nod enough to show the person they're interviewing with that they actually want the job? And I noticed that if I start to feel something for them, it changes me. So I call that humanizing. And if I don't take it personal and I can recognize there's something and I get in my high brain and I make the person human, then my charity can come out, and then all of a sudden I have more energy to adjust.
So those are kind of the mental, maybe emotional tactics. What can we actually do in the situation, what we say, to make it a little more comfortable?
One of the things, I would just talk normal, and I wouldn't like slow down.
Don't go into my baby Emmy voice.
But by the way, the minute they start speaking, it might inform you. So if they start speaking with a more stunted speech pattern, then all of a sudden you get what's going on. But what I also have noticed is some people, if these are people that are close to you, you might notice that when you text them, they emoticon you to death.
Okay, now, yes, I was going to ask you about this because I have noticed too, now it's become observant and it's top of mind, and obviously I'm on a little soapbox here, but a lot of millennials, I feel like, are reflecting or not reflecting emotion, rather. So is there a social media component? Are we hiding behind our
and
screens?
part of it, so think about how we pretty much learn all communication skills is they're socialized. So this is part of our communication, and if we have not been as social and as socially involved, we may not have picked up the cues that you nod, that you shake your head, and that you agree with people. If you're from certain countries or cultures, they don't do it. Certain cultures do not say anything.
That's true.
And they're very quiet and reserved, and even lowering themselves before you. So, so this could be a cultural thing.
Okay.
But with the millennials, we might be starting to see the edge of what happens when people maybe aren't as socially aware and trained in what you do. I mean, even with my own kids, when they're going to a job interview, I'm like, okay, make sure you look them in the eye, shake their hand, show your personality.
You're coaching them up socially.
But you know what? If our kids are too much in their phones, they may not be learning the basic stuff that they need to know. You
want us to ask clarifying questions as well. Like what? What could we ask to draw out?
So even this. So if we've just talked about it, I would say, so tell me, Brooke, of everything we've talked about the last 7 minutes or so, what stood out as the biggest learning for you?
Okay.
And by saying that, then I can start to get feedback in what you did learn. Or I might just say, do you know what I mean? Have you seen an example of where that's happened in your life? Any question to get them talking. Your goal with somebody that doesn't show the affect as much is get them talking more, if you can. If you can't get them talking and they still don't give you much, then humanize them. Make sure they understand it. So do you know what to do if you didn't understand it? You know who to talk to? You might have to seriously ask clarifying questions to make sure they know what they're supposed to do, and then let them be them.
You're awesome. This was super helpful. I hope it wasn't just helpful for me, but maybe other people out there.
Yeah, we've taken care of it.
Now we know. All right, where can viewers get more of your relationship advice?
MattTownsend.com, plus go to coachwithmatt.com, which is a huge thing. We're starting a whole new group of 15 coaches. We've almost finished with the first 15, and they're awesome. They're their hearts, they feel called to change lives, and that's huge. And now we're going to be starting another one in a couple weeks.
So you give these individuals the coaching tools to go out.
I spent tons of hours, 20, 30, probably 30 hours coaching and teaching how to coach relationships. So if you're into that, if you have people that come up and need help, if you want to be a coach, go to coachwithmatt.com.
You're the best. Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Brooklyn.
Coming up next, we shared the best answers to some of your gardening questions. That's next.